Followed by Pledge of Allegiance. Amen. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Councilman Ford?
Here.
Councilman Tremont?
Here.
Councilman Bastian?
Here.
Vice Mayor Stiltner?
Here.
Mayor Burnett?
Mayor Burnett is going to be absent tonight. He had some unexpected surgery that needed to be taken care of, and he is home resting and recovering well. So he sends his best regards, but we will be without the mayor tonight.
Wave to him. He's
Yeah,
watching.
right? I'm sure he's watching.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
And critiquing. Right?
Doing a good job.
Yeah.
You got it good.
Yeah, the chair was adjusted already. Pretty good for me, so. Okay, moving on. Item 4, monthly financial report. Make sure to say hi to the mayor because you know he loves the finance report. So
It's everyone's favorite.
that's everybody's favorite. There you go.
It is indeed.
All yours.
I'm Tracy Ream. Good evening. I'm here to give you the financial report for the period ended January 2018. That was 4 months, so that's 33% of the year has gone by. I don't know if I can move this
And
on.
it is going by quickly.
It is going by quickly. If I can make that go. There we go. That's a little bit easier to see, hopefully.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you'll notice here, by looking at the ad valorem,
Screw him.
that we have caught up. We are at 90% of our budget for ad valorem, and our revenue. And I also want to point out some changes from the last time. You see here, this number is exceptionally large, and that is because at this point we have accrued back the revenue we're hoping to get from FEMA associated with Hurricane Matthew. So last time when we looked at this report, there was a large negative at the bottom line for the general fund. However, now because we've accrued that revenue back in, if you go to the bottom of last year, you see it's at $1.5 million in the hole. Now, that's going to narrow somewhat when we finish booking Hurricane Irma, which we're still working on. So as the audited figures come in, there's still going to be a loss position, basically for the city's portion of the hurricanes that occurred in 17. Just under $1 million is what we're going to have to bear. But it's going to narrow, but it's not going to be as one would hope to see. So anyway, that's the major changes. So when we compare ourselves, getting back to the revenue portion, it's very difficult to compare ourselves to 17 because of the extraordinary activity there. So we want to kind of look back to 16, and you can see that right now we're at 43% of the budget, and 44% would be about normal. So we're tracking where we would expect to track absent that hurricane activity. If we look at the expenses, when we move down here, we have a similar picture. We're at 30% with 33% of the year. They're in line with the expectations. Again, it's difficult when we compare to 17, but if we look back here to 16, you'll see that we're pretty much on target with where we would be. As a reminder, this large number here in the non-departmental, 1.2 of that 2 million is related to the land purchase in December. So, okay.
Tracy, can I just
Yes.
interrupt you 1 second? When
Certainly.
you remind me, when you're speaking to like hurricane related
Mm-hmm.
items and stuff like that, are you doing so inclusive of both hurricanes or the most recent, or?
Well, in 17, we just, at the point that the end of January came, we did not have enough information to book Hurricane Irma.
Okay.
So when we handed the financial statements over to the auditors, we had booked Hurricane Matthew, and we were working on Hurricane Irma. So this figure that you're seeing here does include Matthew, does not include Irma.
Okay.
So Matthew's expenditures, overall, eligible projects were 7.8 million, and about 730 of that remains a city expenditure. Same for state, balance
Okay.
coming from the feds.
Okay.
And Hurricane Irma is in last year just under $1 million.
Okay.
Okay, and then we're going to be bearing about 100,000 of that. So that's why when I say the city's expenses for these hurricanes are just under $1 million.
Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
that we won't get reimbursed.
Thank you.
But yeah,
Tracy-
it's difficult. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, Tracy, then this might be a question to ask for later, but I don't want to forget, and it might be something that Alan is going to need to respond to. Just a couple of months ago, when we came back from Tallahassee, based on our meeting, they said about 3 to 4 weeks of getting the first installment of our reimbursement. Has there been any progress on that?
There's been a lot of conversation about it.
That was 3 to 4 weeks before they approved the money, not before it actually got delivered. So
Right. So the largest portion, we actually just got a notification today that the state is obligating some of our smaller in our emergency protective measures category B, but that's small. The big money is up in the debris removal. So as we look back to Hurricane Matthew, to almost $7 million of the 8 was spent in debris removal. There's some back and forth about what percentages apply, and we're constantly in contact with them. So I think we might get a trickle of money coming up relatively soon, but the big money is not yet here. So
Tracy, can we state that once the hemming and hawing over percentages and stuff like that get taken care of, then at that point it's just processing paperwork and making sure they have this money and sending it to us? Or are we going to fight that percentage fight with every category?
it's only the percentage fight is only related to
Cat B,
the
right.
no, it's the debris removal category A, the first 30 days.
Got it.
That's where we
Okay.
have it.
All right.
So I would hope that they could release after the 30 days. There's 3 groups of it, but we don't have that either. I think when
Right.
we start to get that, then
It'll start flowing.
then the floodgates will open.
Okay.
Yes. Fortunately, it meets revenue recognition rules, so I'm allowed to book it. So that helps
Okay.
when we're looking at fiscal 17. Okay, as we move on and look at the Building Special Revenue Fund, a smaller and more variable fund. Again, with a third of the year gone, we have received 34% of our revenue. Our operating revenue, however, here is at 48%. So we're doing well this time. Our expenditures are located right here in the middle of this $405,000. That's 23% of the budget, about $66,000 more than at this time last year. And that leads us to a profitable position of revenue exceeding expenditures of $194,448. In the water sewer fund, again, a much larger fund. We've got 16 cycles all the way across, which is very helpful. We have here the $7,100,000, and that's $324,000, almost $325,000 more than last year, about 4.8% increase. And that's on a per cycle basis, about $23,000 per cycle that's coming up.
Okay.
Our operating expenses here are $4,156,083, $67,000 more than last year. So it's easy to see that this is going to be more profitable than last year. We've got our non-operating expenses here of $144,000, so that's more than last year. But at the bottom line, we are looking at a loss of $713,000. Again, this is before transfer, so it's normal at this time of year to be in a loss position. Last year we were at $679. So we're spending a little bit more in other projects here, the 212, and we've got better revenue. So it's looking good. Solid Waste Fund is also in good condition. We have revenue there of $2,012,000 between this $2 million at the operating and this non-operating of $11. That's 28% of the budget and $121,000 more than at this time last year. Our operating expenditures are at $1,788,933, and that's in line with the expectations, very close to what we were at last year. So that increased revenue and consistent expenditures lead to a bottom line of $154,904 versus $33,000 at this time last year, but much more close to what we saw in the prior year. So it's in line with expectations. Our water sewer fund, our stormwater fund, we have 85% of our revenue expected. for the years in line with the prior year expectations. We have operating expenses of $493,509, which is 22% of the budget, $20,000 less than last year, so we're right on target. Non-operating expenditures, of $110,000, $52,000 less than last year, and that draws us down to a bottom line of $2,667,389 in positive territory, slightly better than where we were last year at this time, $571,000 more, primarily driven by the increase in revenue. You notice I have some, got the golf course consolidated for you. It is prior to the audit closing, but I'm confident that this is where we're going to end up for the year. So here's your balance sheet. Noteworthy, of course, is the liabilities, which are the advances from the other funds, about $1.6 million to the water sewer fund, and $1.7 million to the loan pool is basically how this $3 million breaks out. What I've done this time is I've dropped in where we were last year at this time to try to give us a comparison to how we're doing. So the big change, of course, is the change in the restaurant activities from a rental, where we had rental income, to where we're having revenue and expenditures. So if you look at this year versus last year, most noteworthy is that we have had a decline in revenue of about $29,000 between this $425 and the $395. And that is reflected also in the reduction in the surcharge. If you look at what the golf course just by itself, our agent reduced their expenditures by $52,000. So it would be more profitable, but for the restaurant activity. In that case, the restaurant brought in $79,550 and expended $102,573 for a delta of $23,023. So when we tend to look at these, it's wisest to focus on the operating income. If we look at the bottom line, of course, we had transferred in $10,000 from the general fund to deal with repairs and such. So this bottom line at this point is somewhat misleading at $808. The operating line is much more reflective of where we would be. If we look at last year where Kemper ended up, the Kemper themselves, just their operation had a loss of, it washes over to us, but just looking at them alone was a $37,000 loss. The fund as a whole is going to post a loss because of depreciation. So when you get the CAFR out, you're going to see a loss of about $150,000, most of which is depreciation, about $37,000 coming from operations. And so here is our golf course rounds, lagging last year by, at this point, 1,686. So the heavy blue line. I apologize that the one that was sent out to you, for some reason the blue line did not print properly. So it's been updated for you here. I'm pleased for any questions. The report follows up with Kemper and the YMCA as provided by them.
Jason?
Good.
Bob?
Oh, no, as long as we're doing well, I'm to the point with the golf course, we're going to take a slight loss on the golf course, and the amenity it provides for the community makes it certainly worthwhile. Just main thing is with the golf course, we need to keep a constant eye on it so it doesn't get too far out of balance. So, and I'm hopeful with the new restaurant, that will be a reduction in our operating loss when that comes into effect.
Okay.
Overall, it looks like our revenue stream is still strong, and we're keeping operating expenses under control.
Okay.
Can't ask for more than that.
Do you have something you want to go back and add?
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead.
I'm just, and Bob pointed to it, and I'm wondering this question every week when we talk about the golf course. It's a community. We're committed to it. I'm committed to it as well. But at what point, what does it need? And maybe this might be a question for Bob and the golf board. What does it need to finish in the black? Every year we keep operating in the red, and I'm seeing all these other golf courses. I mean, if it's a private golf course, I mean, they're closing down at this rate. So I'm wondering, I guess, for a conversation later, are we holding them back? Is there anything that we need to do to untie the hands of Kemper to start finishing in the black where it needs to be? So I guess that's.
I think the going in argument before was that's not where it needed to be, and we liked the way the golf course looked for the price, give or take, of what it cost to keep it looking like that. We didn't want to raise the cost of, based on analysis by Kemper and somewhat the board, if I recall, that the cost per round is at a sweet spot.
Yeah.
So the only thing you can do is get more golfers in there. And with more golfers comes more wear and tear, becomes more maintenance, becomes more money. So at least I got here when it was open, but it closed right after that, and then reopened. And at that time, council agreed that a slight loss, because it was a public good, was doable. You know, that's where we set. If the future decision of council is for them to be in the black, then we're going to have to provide them that guidance, and they're going to provide us a little bit of feedback on how they intend on doing that. But that wasn't. I think Councilman Ford had, when he was on the board, well, we were both on that board at the time. We were talking about acceptable losses, and what we wanted to keep that standard of golf course up, keep the amount of golfers coming, and although they didn't promise when the golf course was redone that it would be in the black, it would bleed less than it did in the previous years, and I think they're starting to come above what they were before. Am I right in that? Not last year, but before it got renovated. So
It's running slightly at a lesser loss now.
And I'm all right with that. And that I would have, if I had been on council the same, I'd have been under the same feeling about it.
Chase, we went through about every possible scenario on the golf board for a period of about 3 years, trying to chase down what the problem was. We changed fee structures, we made passes, so a lot of things were done. I think the conclusion I came to is that the golf business is in decline right now for a whole series of economic and social reasons, and the amount of competition in this area is so much that it is difficult. If you raise your prices beyond a certain point, you're going to lose money because of
I wouldn't want to do that.
it's something we wouldn't want to do to our community members, but also it's not going to win because there's so many competing courses. And I sad to say, as the population in the area grows, which it is definitely growing, it may well make the golf course more profitable, all the ones around here, as there's a larger population base for them to draw upon. There has been a decline in the last year or two, I know, in the number of players. It's been slight, but it's been consistent. And, that is one thing, Chase, we could look at. Is there anything we can do to bring the number of players up by about 1,000 a month, something to that effect? A little high, but say 500 a month. And that's something that may be doable. I don't know.
Yeah, good comments. I think, too, to keep in mind that the golf course, like Bob was mentioning earlier, it does provide some other benefits to us as a city. Certainly property values in that area are reflective of that, as well as it gives us another location where, when we need to, it gives us a place to get rid of some reclaimed water.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a benefit. I mean, it's great to have a facility like that and that much space, and not to have to worry about sending that and putting it in the river or something like that. So there's some other benefits there, and then there's probably some things that are pretty tough to measure, like the simple value of a lot of our residents that are golfers and what it means to them to be able to have a community course that's their neighborhood or their local course, and that it's a great place to go play. And certainly, I think that what we have is a city or a municipal course that's probably more reflective in a lot of ways of the quality of a lot of private courses. So, and that's great.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
that's a
It's-
really good thing. But
It's always been the
Yeah.
best course in town, in my
Right.
opinion. And let me just clarify, this is not a, my statement and question was,
no,
I want to make sure we're not doing anything to hold them back.
I agree. I agree. Drew?
No, I mean, thank you for presenting, and, the golf course is what it is, and, I don't think it's ever really been profitable, but, if we can minimize the losses out there, then, like I said, for the benefit that it provides in all those other areas, then that's okay.
For sure.
So,
And let's all go to dinner out there and lunch from time to time. Once our new,
Starting 1st of April, right?
no, it's what,
As soon as we can get them in there. 1st April
First
is
April?
the intent.
I'll be out there.
Council, one other thing that I want you just to, you don't have to comment on, but take away, is I think Tracy mentioned about a $3.5 million loan pool. About 1.5, 1.7 of that is water sewer, and the rest is general fund. So we need to take a look at whether it's going to be paid back, at least the general fund part, and then B, how. That amount can't just sit there ad infinitum. I know they're better at a loss, but from a finance and accounting perspective, we need to take a look at that here in the future.
Okay.
And come up with some ideas. And Tracy will present some options for what you can do, how you can do it, and where we go. But if they're not gonna be making $100,000 a year, we're gonna be paying back $3.5 million for a long time. And recall that the sewer, we're bonded with
Yes.
the water sewer portion, so that needs to be taken care of.
Thank you. Anybody from the public want to speak to that report? John, good to see you.
all right, John.
Speaking of golf,
Yeah, I'm John Cameron, 1873 Corpash in Port Orange, and I felt compelled to come up after the report about the golf course and just add in a few things. I appreciate the manager bringing up the fact that there is a lot of debt on the golf course. It is it is a really hard thing to overcome, and I don't know how you're going to solve it. I just will add this, that communities like New Smyrna Beach have just simply forgiven it.
That is one of the options.
Yep, they just simply forgiven it, and that allows the business to hopefully operate at a profit and then improve itself with its own profit instead of having to worry about making payments.
Yeah.
So it's not unprecedented to do that. The other thing is that the course itself, the business plan, has got some flaws. The prepaids are prohibiting the best collection at the best time, because that's when you get the most amount of rounds at prime operating time. So if you're pre-selling your tee sheet, like we're doing, even at the rate we're doing it, we're losing money on every one of them. So if you could somehow get them to play at another time, later in the day or whatever, we might have a better chance of getting that more rounds and getting that dollar per round up. I think getting another 1,000 rounds a month, it'd be very difficult to do. The golf course is already very busy. So, when I go there on Saturdays, it's wall to wall. So, and it should be this time of year. It's February, it's beautiful, the weather's real good. The other comment I would make is, on these numbers, January was very wet. They lost probably 15 days, and
Sure.
That's beyond their control. The conditioning of the course remains to be uncertain. I think that there's work to be done this spring, and hopefully they'll do it to get the condition up, get the weeds out, make it more pleasurable for people to play. Cleaner fairways, cleaner tees, greens that don't roll at a pedestrian rate. I've played a couple of courses in the past couple of weeks that had better greens than Cypress Head in terms of speed and condition. And both of those tracks are loaded, and they're actually charging more. So that needs to be looked at. However, because of the undulation of our greens, that may not be doable. So those are just my 2 cents, and I appreciate your time.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Come on.
Yeah, thanks, John. Anybody else? All right. Item 5. Highlight performance of the evening, no doubt.
Nice beer.
By the way, from the city manager's perspective, the fact that this is the highlight and not number 6,
I'm pretty happy with that.
No, that's the wrong file. Good evening, City Council. Alan Rosen, Assistant City Manager. Tonight we're here to talk about our fee philosophy, which is fun. I love philosophy. I fell asleep in that class all the time. I never took it, but so it says charges for services. There are different things: charges for services, fees. What we're really talking about is technically charges for services. That's why I call it this, but we call it fees. And we're specifically focused tonight on Parks and Recreation. We charge for different things all throughout the organization. We're focused tonight specifically on that. So what I'm going to kind of cover tonight, and we're going to go over, why do local government, why do we have charges for services at all? What are they for? What our current charges look like against ourselves and others over time, and then talk about the balancing act, the philosophy of how you set these things. And it's interesting because it's not just balancing act on one aspect, it's a balancing act on 2 or 3 at the same time. So it's actually a lot more cerebral than most cities really put into it, and I'd really like to get there. And then we're going to kind of put that aside, and then the second topic we're going to talk about are fee waivers. Again, really specifically to a lot of stuff that happens at parks, but it also affects some of the other departments as well. And then I'll put some recommendations in the back. As a spoiler alert, it's going to be great because the recommendations say don't change much. It's a really easy one. So there are 2 basic reasons that governments use charges for services. The main one is really to create a balancing act, to see here, between the people that use the service, charging them for that, as opposed to charging everyone else. And so the answer is that there is no correct answer on this. It's really what you want your own community to be. You'll see in a minute, it's all over the map. No right, no wrong answer. Now, there are some consequences to doing one versus the other, and we'll talk about that. But the choice is, again, do you charge philosophically? Do you charge those people who use the services, or do you charge the homeowners, or pull the revenue from other taxing areas that you have in your general fund or whatever it is? That's one reason that governments do it. They want to have a balance. The other is to diversify your revenue stream. So in diversifying your revenue stream, if you have an economic downturn, you don't want it to hit. You have one revenue stream and it hits that, you're in a lot of trouble. The more diversification you have for your revenue, the less trouble you're going to be in if one sector gets impacted than another. So that's another reason. Not the main reason, but another reason. You see here that in our general fund, which is the kind of revenue we're talking about, 8.4% of our revenue in the general fund comes from these sources, just to give you an idea. So how do we have the ability to do it? As a city in the state of Florida, they give us the ability to create charges for services. We put it in our code of ordinances, and then every year, generally, the Parks and Rec Department. Oh man, I thought you left. It's like, man, I bored her already to tears. Parks and Rec will come with a resolution to say, here's what we would like to charge everybody for these services this year, and the City Council approves that. So to give you an idea of where we are, over the last 4 years, again, this is just Parks and Recreation alone, on average, we've recouped about 28.3% of our costs of providing these services that are related to things that we charge for in our user fees, right? The rest of the cost of those services comes from the other general fund revenue, your ad valorem taxes, the sales tax, all that stuff. And you can see here it was kind of going up, and it came a little bit down the last couple of years, but on average 28-30% is kind of where we've been, right? Now, in comparison to other cities, we have a relationship with an organization called the Florida Benchmarking Consortium. Sometimes they have stuff that I don't like. Sometimes they have really great information. This time they had the perfect measure that I was looking for, which is the percent of their operational budget supported by user charges. Again, this is just Parks and Recreation. There's 15 cities that reported this information. This was from 2016, including us. And you can see here that Deerfield Beach, they've decided as a community, whether they've done it on purpose or not, that they want to collect a lot of their costs back on user charges. Pinellas Park, on the other hand, they've decided we'll collect 11%, the rest of it will fall to the rest of the general fund revenue. Again, there's no right answer to this. It's really what you want to do in your community. And you can see here the peer average is 33%. We were at 27 in 2016, so we're kind of in a sweet spot. We're kind of in the middle. So the other balancing act that Parks and Rec or any other department has to do when they do this exercise every year is not just how much do we want to charge the user versus how much do we want to charge everybody else, that whether they use the service or not, is how much is everybody else around us charging, right? Because you can't just look at one thing in a vacuum. You could say, council could say, I really wish we would charge, get 88% back. Well, we could come back to you with a fee resolution that might price us out of the market. Right, and they're going to start voting with their feet. Hey, I want my kid to go to baseball, but Port Orange is $500 a season. Another city is $250. It's about the same. I'll just send them there. I'll drive up there. That's fine. So when you're setting these things, Parks and Rec has a very hard job to do. We've never set a fee philosophy in terms of how much we want to collect. For some things, kind of we have in a way, but not on an overall level. But they're also looking at where everybody else is. They want to make sure they don't price us out of the market. And it's interesting. So I called a bunch of cities, not just the ones represented here. I just threw some seals on here. But I called a bunch of cities in the county, and I asked them specifically, how do you set your fees? Do you have a philosophy? And they pretty much without fail all said, and maybe I was talking to the wrong person, but they all pretty much said, we just look at what everybody else is charging, and we try to stay within the ballpark. There's none of that higher level cerebral process going on of, as a community, where would we want to be at charging the people that are using the services versus having it come from the other source of revenue. So there's those two balancing acts that we need to do to make sure that we're both in the ballpark, but also where we want to be philosophically. So we'll get back to the recommendation, but the recommendation kind of here is, over the last couple of years, we've been about 28-30%, and this includes any fee waivers you've given, right? All the special things that come through. This is just raw budget numbers. So even with that in mind, we've collected about 28 to 30% in user charges to pay for those services versus, ad valorem taxes or other sources. So the recommendation here is, unless council wants to make a wide swing, we're kind of in a sweet spot versus where we are with other cities in our philosophy, and also we've kind of still priced ourselves within the market. Council can make a change to its philosophy if it wishes. Of course, you can do anything you want. But just keep in mind that as that goes up, you have less pressure on the general fund, but you may price yourself out of the market. Vice versa, as it goes down, you put more pressure on ad valorem taxes or other sources of revenue, where people that don't necessarily use the service may be paying for it. It's just a balancing act. No right answers wherever you want to be.
Hey, can I just interrupt you one
Sure.
second? Because I would like to hear from Susan in a little bit. And what I'm interested in is you've said the price ourselves out of the market a couple of different times. So I kind of want to hit home on that towards the end. I don't want to get you off your flow here, but I'm really interested in a little bit about that in terms, because it seems like a lot of the market comes to us from other cities. And so I want to touch on that somewhere later.
Yeah,
But go ahead.
locally.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. And another aspect of that is that the cheaper you make it, the more people will flock here to do things, the more cost we will have on our end to support those people, and the more burden it'll have on our taxpayers on the other side. So there's always that part of it too to think about. And in terms of, it's interesting you brought that up. So I brought this too. You're not throwing me off because I have this. Two things
Looks like I broke your stride.
No, you
Go ahead.
actually put them in overdrive.
You
Yeah,
anticipated. You anticipated. I like it.
So in my prior life, I used to be a local government management consultant. I'll actually show you something that I did a couple of years ago out in California. But I knew the answers I was going to get when I started doing it here, so I started doing it just to see, and sure enough, I found the exact same thing. The job that they have to do to price themselves in the market is much, much harder than you would think it is. So I started calling other cities. The problem you have when you're trying to set your fees is your resources that you have to rent out, to provide for people for special events, whatever it is never going to be the exact same as any other city.
Right.
You also may charge by age group. Somebody else may charge by number of games. You may charge whether there's lights or no lights. Somebody else may not. It's all over the place. Somebody else may charge by the day. Somebody else may charge by the hour. So to compare apples to apples is not worth the money for you to find out. And I felt bad as a consultant doing this for a city in California because there were so many caveats to what we were looking at. I told them it doesn't make sense for us to look for it, but they wanted us to push for it anyway. I'll show you that in a minute. But just to give you an idea, what I did is I took basically column B and column C were our current fee resolution. I just wrote it down there. And then I started looking at other cities. I asked them to send me their fee resolutions. Again, they may not have the same exact thing, but I try to compare as much as possible. And you see here, some of them, maybe were, $10 off or maybe $30 off. Ormond Beach goes up to 102. We're at 70. So, and that's for youth sports. Rentals too. We've got adult programs, senior programs, special events, sponsorship, athletic. I'm trying to Lakeside Community Center. So nobody else has a Lakeside Community Center. They may have the Brandon Center. They may have just some random place in the middle of nowhere. And so, some people may complain that, ours is really high for a rental fee right out in the river. That's a beautiful location. Other places might be in the middle of a city. There's not really much to look at. It is what it is. So it's very hard to compare those things. But I did start looking at that and just trying to see if we were kind of in the market. And in general, we are. But it's really hard for departments to do that. And I'll give you, this is the example I have from when I did, we did something for Brentwood, California. This is one piece of information. There is more notes to the data than there actually is data. There's almost a half a page of notes about how you need to compare these things because they're not apples to apples. This is how hard it is to compare these type of things. This one's a really good one. Average sport field rental fee comparison. So, some people do it by grass, synthetic. You've got these 8-10 cities here. The whole page is almost taken up by notes to try to compare apples to apples. So it's a very hard job to really see if you're in the market. Everybody does it so differently. It's no different here. I know you'll ask her later, but that was kind of...
We'll have a question that might be for Parks and Rec to respond later on. I'm just curious to see how this money is used. Is it go into the pool of Parks and Rec, or are they earmarked for certain things? The gym, for example. We're coming up. It didn't charge anything to get into the gym, and now we do. So what was paying for what before that, and what's that money now going to? And that might not have to answer that now. It could be a question later, but I didn't want to forget to ask that.
No, that's a good finance question. Basically, any revenue in the general fund, it can be for anything. It's all one pot. It's all for anything in the general fund. Generally, when you have something where you want to earmark specific revenues for something, you might have a special revenue fund where it segregates those revenues and those expenditures for that thing. Let's say a good example is the 106 fund, which is the YMCA building. It is now, it's just the YMCA building. So all their rent goes into that fund, and everything we spend for that building goes out of that fund. For stuff like this, I don't think you would find many cities that, or maybe zero cities, zero cities that would put Parks and Rec fees into its own fund for its own thing. So fee waivers. Before we really get into this is our second topic for the evening, the fee waivers. Before we even get into that, I wanted to make you aware of kind of what staff currently does behind the scenes and some things that we're actually trying to do a better job of based on actually council input over the last year or so. So one of the things we try to do is shift schedules if we can to reduce overtime. If there's no, for example, Park and Rec overtime, they don't charge that. Let's say you're having a special event. If they can shift around schedules and have somebody working on regular time to do whatever it is they need to do, we don't charge them for that. It's only the overtime if they can't figure out how to schedule it around that person. The other thing is we do work with all the parties to ensure appropriate staffing levels. So if somebody comes to us and says, I want to do this special event, and Parks and Rec takes the information, they give it to police, they give it to Public Works, they come back with a recommendation, I think we need 3 officers. They can still come back before they ever get to council and say, I don't think it needs 3, and they can have a discussion as to why, and it could be that maybe there was a miscommunication. Well, we're not really doing that, we're doing this. Oh, well, in that case, yeah, I agree with you, you only need 2. So that conversation does happen, I think, before it ever comes to council, if there's good communication going on. The other is Resolution 1531. So this is the in-kind donation resolution, dollar for dollar in-kind donation. So the best example I can give, well, not the best, but one of the examples I can give to council is within the last year, Sherry Williams, she was drafted in the WNBA. She asked if she could use Lakeside Center, and she said she would be willing to provide a clinic or come back and speak to people, coaches, I think. And so we were able to determine, and council, I guess, agreed, that would provide a benefit for the community in exchange for the fee that she would use to pay for that. So we have that in our toolbox already. So on top of anything that people ask for fee waivers, we already have this in our arsenal that actually staff has the ability to say, we agree that this provides a benefit and will knock off a certain amount of the cost. So yes, this is Dave Chappelle. For those of you who do stand
coming tonight?
comedy, I wish he would definitely provide a much better presentation than I would.
At least 3 minutes worth.
Yeah.
We couldn't afford it. It wasn't in the budget.
So there.
Fee was too high.
Well, it's actually so. This picture is interesting because there are two ways that our fee waivers come to council in general. There's the one-offs, and this is my one-off picture where people come to council and they say, "Hey, I'm doing this thing, and I'd like some money off." We don't have the ability to waive it; it comes to council. And so I looked up on Google, people petitioning, city council, and this was one of the first pictures that popped up. Okay. Apparently, Dave Chappelle went to a city council and was asked for something. I thought that was cool. The other way, that things come before council, aside from the one-offs, are the contracts. So we have a 5-year agreement that's coming up soon also with Family Days, right? So that's a contract. There's some things that the city manager has the ability to sign with some athletic contracts. So that's another way. So the question really is, how are you able to treat these things the same? Not in what they do for the community, but if they're both coming and asking for some fee waivers, whether it's a long-term contract or whether it's a one-off, how do you provide the same matrix to be able to make a decision as to what you're waiving for both these organizations, regardless of what the length of time or how they're coming to you? So that's one question. The other is, how do we determine as an organization, we want to look at, there are certain things we want to look at and things we don't want to look at, right? So we want to look at what they're providing the community. What type of event is this? Is kind of what we want to look at, and not necessarily who is doing it. Because you can have situations where a for-profit, let's say, organization or a nonprofit organization may be coming here to raise money for something that's really near and dear to our hearts. It's a nonprofit that may not be directly related to them, or somebody might be coming here to raise money because that's what I do for a living. I want to do a pumpkin festival, right? So how do we judge these in a fair manner? So that's the question. So what I tried to do is I tried to look at what council has done in the past. Looking at 5Ks, looking at family days, looking at weddings that happen in the pavilion. What has council provided in the past in terms of fee waivers, and for what type of events? And so I wanted to take the past, I wanted to use that to predict the future for not only those things that have already come before council, but how can I ask the question of agencies that come to us that have never come to us before, but use the same criteria to get an answer that I think council might give based on what's happened in the past, right? And in that way, hopefully staff can come to you with recommendations that are more in line with what you're thinking, as opposed to we don't recommend or yeah, we recommend. We want to try to be more in line with you as a team to provide recommendations for where you're going. So that was my goal. So what I did is I created a matrix. You'll see an example of it in a minute. And I whittled it down to 4 questions. The great thing, I'll say this probably a couple of times, is this is a living, breathing thing, and we can change it a million times if we want to. But what I did is I also didn't want to reinvent the wheel. So if you look at Chapter 50 of the Code of Ordinances, there's already a list in there of organizations, a hierarchy of organizations for use of our facilities, per se. Like the City of Port Orange was number 1. We need to be able to use our own facilities. And there's a list of things that we may ask a question of what kind of organization is this that we might provide, a hierarchy of who can use that facility, who's on first, second, third, and fourth. So I took some information directly from Chapter 50 and used that, since we've already agreed that these are things that are important to us as an organization, and put it in this matrix. So the first question would be, not necessarily of importance, but the first question I asked is it open to the public? Without regard to religion or membership in some organization, can anybody go? That's one of the questions I asked. The second one, again, straight from Chapter 50, does it provide the community cultural, social, and cultural opportunities for this type of engagement? That's the next question I ask. These next two aren't in Chapter 50, but looking at what's happened in the past, I've used this as a crosswalk to try to get to where we're going, and I think where council was. Is it free? Or is there going to be a charge for parking? Is there going to be a charge for everybody to get in, or not? Is it free? The other is,
Really,
if there...
our parks, really, you can't charge anybody for anything, no kidding.
Is
Our
it free
parks,
for people to come? Yes.
You can.
In some of the, there are some instances, correct me if I'm wrong, where echo dollars
That's what I
may be
mean.
tied to something, and there may be some provisions for doing, stuff like that if it's a park that is tied
Which
to other organizations.
Riverwalk has some echo
funding and
dollars,
stuff like that.
as Karachi. I mean, those are the two.
I'll give my example that I had in my head that I looked at from the last couple of years was a gentleman had come and asked the council for a fee waiver to do a pumpkin festival. And this was something, it was a private organization. He does this as his job. Does it provide cultural or social activities for the community? Absolutely. I guess you could argue that it does. At the same time, it's a private organization. He's doing it to make money for himself. It's not to raise money for a charity or anything. So, and I think his proposal was, I'm going to charge either parking or I'm going to charge an entry fee. That's how I'm going to make my money. Now, according to Chapter 50 of your Code of Ordinances, you allow that opportunity. People can come and ask you, hey, I want to do this and I want to charge for it. Council in the past has not been really receptive to that. It's not really where they want to go as a community, but Chapter 50 allows that possibility in those certain circumstances for council to make that decision. So the question is, if you're raising money, even if it's free for everybody, I'll give you an example. Here is Family Days. Anybody can go, but you can't ride the rides for free. You can't eat the food for free. You can listen to the music and grade our pumpkins for free that we do as departments. But the money that they use is for a good purpose, but not everything's free. And some things are free, like pop-up parks. So the other thing is, if they're raising money, are they raising money for themselves? The example I have here is the Pumpkin Festival. There are also 5Ks that aren't necessarily for raising money for good organizations. People actually put them on, and I asked our resident expert, the PIO, because I know she runs and bikes and all that stuff. And there are people who put those on, and that's what they do for a living. It's not to raise money. So there are people who do that kind of thing just to make money for themselves. So that's another question that I asked. So this is kind of an example of what I did. I kind of used Family Day Spring Fair as kind of the jumping off point. How can I create some sort of matrix and calculation that I can apply to everything that we do that will get us to an answer that is very close to what council has decided in the past, and then use that on things that have never happened to get the same result, right? So now we're grading everybody the same way. So what you see here is kind of something that staff would take. They would fill out if somebody asked them for a reduction in fee. It would be attached to the agenda item and come to council as kind of a backup of information. And you'll see in a minute that I'm not recommending a change to the process, just a tool to use for the process. So this is kind of how this would work. And somebody would come in and say, I want to do this thing, and can I get a fee waiver? So they would come in and staff would say, okay, well, let me ask you a couple of questions. It would start out at the top left. You see here, total charge at the very top, 100%. Everybody starts at 100%. You're going to pay 100%. Then you answer these questions. Depending on how the questions are answered, you either get a deduction from the 100% or you get money, or you get a percent added back to it. In the end, at the bottom, you see there's 15% there. No matter how you answer the questions, and you'll see this in a minute, no matter how you answer the questions, you can't get above 100 and you can't get below 0. Cool stuff in Excel. I'm a geek. So again, we went through kind of all these questions. Again, is it open to public participation? Family Day Spring Fair? Yes. All right, so you get a 20% discount there. Is it aimed at promoting, facilitating physical, social, or cultural activities in the community? You could argue yes or no, but I say yes here, 25%, right? Free admission, yep, 15% discount. Proceeds benefit nonprofit, government, public educational institution, yep, 25% discount. Now, why 15%? I'll tell you why 15%. Because as we currently do it, they pay for, it's not 15% discount, it's 15% of the total cost. Currently, Family Days pays 15% of their total cost. That's why I wanted to figure out how do I get to 15% using what's important to council, right? And so, and I'll show you another example in a minute. Yeah, I'll show you. Go ahead and show you this. So I'd say, what about a wedding or birthday? I did like 20 of these. Wedding or birthday over here at Lakeside. Is it open to the public? No. All right, we're going to add 25%. Is it aimed at promoting, facilitating physical, social, cultural activities? No, it's my private thing. Add 25%. You see at the bottom, they're still paying 100%. So there's positive and negatives because you could end up in a situation, again, completely hypothetical. Let's say I want to, I'm a member of a different religion that's not prevalent here in the city of Port Orange. But I want everybody to be able to come and experience what it's like to go to this religion's type of wedding. You can come, you don't have to bring me a present. It's free. I'm not going to charge you for food. I want people to come. In that situation, I would actually probably get a discount because I'm opening it up to everybody in the community. I want them to experience a different cultural activity. It's free for everybody. I'm not raising any money and I'm not giving any money to anybody. It'll end up, at some discount. It's not going to be like a 15% that they pay. It might be like 40 or 80%. But
is there a way to have that? There's something doesn't feel right about giving a waiver to people that just want to have a family wedding in there. I had my wedding over there. I didn't mind paying the fees, and that's what you do when you're having weddings. You expect to pay,
right.
And the cost of using that is phenomenal already as it is.
He just kind of gave you a scenario that probably wouldn't happen to show you the numbers.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to invite everybody in the city, 61,000 people, to their wedding and feed them.
Yeah. Yeah, this one that you see on your screen is an example of a wedding. You would pay 100%. You have a birthday party, you'd pay the cost.
And if a scenario is 100% waived, that's not waiving liability.
No, I would never recommend waiving liability.
Okay.
Can I put that on record?
Ever.
Ever. This is just fees that relate to our fee resolution for staff time, for facilities, any costs that we have that we would normally charge that you would see in your fee resolution for Parks and Rec, police, public works, fire. Again, we've talked about those other things. The other thing I wanted to make in addition to this is that this also isn't the end-all be-all, and I'll show you the process in a minute. But keep in mind Resolution 1531. So if somebody comes and, let's say, Family Days or some other organization comes and they say, I want a discount. Staff puts this through and they say, well, we recommend you pay 80%. And they're like, well, I'm willing to come back and do some clinics for free for basketball students, in the different high schools because I'm going to be in the WNBA. And we figure out what that is. We can provide an additional discount on top of this. This is just one tool to kind of get where we want to go. So as I said before, the current process for people asking for waivers is they come in, they want to do a special event, or they're doing athletic stuff. Again, this is whether or not they're coming for a contract or a one-off. There's a waiver request. Staff prepares an agenda item, whether it's a contract or whether it's a one-off. Council makes a decision, right? The recommendation here is there's no change to that process at all whatsoever at this point. Either way it comes through, staff would prepare that decision matrix, and it would make its way to you in the recommendation, also in the agenda item. So basically the recommendations here are, cost recovery. I don't recommend a change. It seems like we've hit a sweet spot, and you can talk more to Parks and Rec if you want in a second. We seem to have hit a sweet spot between maybe where we're priced in the market, maybe or maybe not. But it seems like we're kind of there, and also in terms of how much we're charging other revenue resources versus the charges for services that we charge. But keep in mind, if council wants to make a change to that, that's one of the things I'm asking is, do you want to change that philosophy? But just keep in mind, if you change that philosophy, that there will be implications either way. No right or wrong answer, just changes to those things. Waivers, not recommending a change of the process at this point, just recommending that we are going to start providing a tool to you to help you better be able to make decisions, not in a vacuum, but with that framework in mind that's already partially there in Chapter 50. And in addition, keep in mind that we do other things that might reduce the cost of these certain things to other people. And I think there was one other thing, but that's pretty much it for my presentation. So if you have any thoughts about either of those subjects or questions, we'd love to hear them.
That's everything? Man,
Wow.
I thought there'd be more.
How long did I go? I felt
no
it was
like
long
video
enough.
clips or anything.
I did want to come. I did want to come down with lights and music and smoke machines and stuff.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm gonna have some
That-
questions.
That's not in the budget.
No budget for that.
I'm gonna have some questions here, so
Fire chief won't
So
let
don't
you
go-
use a smoke machine in chambers
don't go
anyways.
far. Drew, what are your thoughts?
The tool that you're talking about, it would be something similar to what you just presented us for the thing, and then it'd still come to us, but we'd have additional information. Because, I mean, sometimes they come up here and you know, they'll sign up at the last minute and we don't have information. We're just going on what, not related to Parks and Rec, but like we had a water thing, they came up here, we're like, what are we waiving? What are we reducing? Sometimes we just don't know because of lack of information. So any additional information would definitely be welcomed.
By the way, I would suggest that we not act on those when they come up. So staff
you
can,
know,
staff can give
and that's
you-
what I mean, because in the past would be like, well, we need more information.
Right.
So, you know, having this would be great. And, you know, if we're recovering roughly, you know, the sweet spot is roughly 30% and we're just about there, then you're probably right. There probably shouldn't be too many changes to the process, because if you go too high, the kids are going to go, and if you go too low, we're going to have, you know, if we're not recouping enough, then we're going to be overwhelmed. And you know, there's, with soccer especially, the field situation gets kind of crowded at times. So I can definitely appreciate the time you put into this and the effort, and it seems like we're doing some things right.
I did want to also add, I remember what I was going to say before, with this tool, it's so fluid, it can change over time. So my hope is that we start using it, start bringing it to council, and we start providing recommendations that you agree with. Or maybe you don't. Maybe you're like, Alan, I don't know. I think, you know, it should be a little more, a little bit less. And I can gather information. Every time you make those decisions, I can say, I think they're going in this direction. I can take the tool, tweak a little bit, give back to staff, and hopefully next time, you know, over 3, 4, 5, 6 months or a year, every time these things come to you, we get closer and closer to where hopefully 98, 99% of the time we're coming to you, it's where you're thinking you want to be anyway. The other great thing about it is it can also be expanded. We've got 4 things there. I don't want to have like a whole page of questions, but you know, some people might say, well, you know what, Alan, this also is really important to me. You don't have it on there. I'd like to capture that. And I can add some of those things. In addition, in 5 years from now, let's say, you know, there's a little bit different mix on council 10 years from now, and they say, you know, their philosophy of where they want to be or what they want to give waivers for is completely different. Great. I can change that tool, and it can automatically start providing those recommendations. Again, we want to be on the same page. We want to be on the same team. We want to be providing you recommendations with where you're in line, what you're thinking.
Yeah, I think that's good, and you kind of alluded to the fact that if we come up with a process, then everybody would receive the same. They'd be treated the same across the board. So that's probably definitely a good thing to do.
Anything else?
Nope.
Bob, thoughts?
Interesting issue, and it was quite contentious during the year. Turned out it was contentious about not much, because financially the council hadn't given away much, and most of the expenditures are on ones we've had partnerships with, not a thing. I think what happened, and I see in your tool addressing the reality of council's concern. Council, as I've listened to the council around here, I think it's quite a majority, do want regular events. They want our parks used. We've put a considerable investment. It's a strong feeling, and I know I share it with a number of other council people, that you really change a city from simply being an amalgam of bedrooms to an actual community through events, through bringing people together, making them feel an attachment to their community. And that's what a lot of the discussion about waivers was. The one variable I think you need to add to your matrix is, at least I, and I think several council members, have a very different approach to startups. Like, for example, this spring, early summer, we're going to be starting an event down at Riverwalk. I, as a council person, am willing to absorb more of the cost and give larger waivers for the first couple of years. What we call that is startup capital. Get the events. We want Riverwalk used. We like good quality events down there. Probably for the first year or two. Now, as those events mature and they develop financial capabilities, then their ability to pay a larger and more appropriate proportion of the actual costs that are ensued for the city change. That's the way I see it. As these events become more mature and more financially capable, we certainly can change the matrix or how much we're asking. So that's one thing. I don't think this is ever going to be a cookie cutter approach, because after looking at all the different charities that have come before us, I went through with your assistance, as you remember, all the different events. We looked at all the different charities. Boy, were they an amalgam, everyone a little different, and everyone with a little different need. So, and then for the departments, you know, I come from the old Port Orange tradition, where the departments did kick in more themselves. I'm talking about the police department. We used to move our officers around. Our poor motor unit used to, its days off for a function of special events on the weekend, you know, because we schedule them to be available. And then we wouldn't charge, or we'd charge the reduced rate, which would not include overtime. So those are the issues that I'm looking at. I was surprised by my analysis as I went through all the events and how much they cost the city and how much we waived, that the really big cost are for city employees for the events. Like, for example, the new startup, then a project that's going to be a joint Rotary Chamber function. I think the initial cost is going to be $10,000, not for fees, but to pay for staff to be there: police, fire, public works, recreation. And I think for us, for council, the issue in the future is how much of those costs do we waive, how much of those costs do we put back on the departments, or how much do we run at a full overtime rate. And that's going to be a difficult one, especially if you want to start up projects. You can certainly price yourself out of the project market by high initial expenses before the project or the event becomes what you would say successful. So, but no, I found it an interesting dialogue, and I do want to, for a lot of people in the community got the mistaken impression that a lot of money was being spent by council. What was it, 16,000 total?
I think in 2017, not accounting for the contracts that we
Yeah.
have, it was about 7,000.
$7,000 was all that was waived. So it wasn't big money, but I guess it caught a lot of attention.
Chase?
Very good. I was very happy to finally learn what Dave Chappelle was doing in there. I looked at this past weekend. I thought about calling you, but I didn't want to call you on Saturday out of respect for you. So thanks for that education. Good presentation. I think you're clearly hitting everything that we've been doing over the past, at least since I've been on council the past year. Bob brings up a very good point about startups and looking into adding that as a portion of it. I think the matrix, the rubric that you put together is pretty solid, to be honest with you. I see this as a big picture, a policy decision that we're making. I would like for discussion at some point to go a little further and allowing city manager and staff to be the ones to make those calls when it comes down to it. I see you guys are the ones that have to live within the budget. You're the ones that know more how it affects you day in and day out. We still get to oversee, obviously, And for transparency purposes, I'd like to know everything that is waived or not waived. But I think it removes a lot of the bureaucracy, speeds up the process. I think sometimes people having to wait to get here, doesn't help the timing of everything. So that was my only real comment about that. Is I'm willing to entertain allowing city staff to make those calls with this guidance that's been put together by council.
I'm going to kind of bounce around a little bit, and I want to reflect back here on a couple of things as I ask you some questions, and if need be, Susan's welcome to come up here and join you. And then we'll go to the public for some comments, and maybe back to council. I think this is, this is an issue, and certainly I know the mayor is going to want to weigh in on some of this at a later date when he's around, and so I know he's listening at home, and because he couldn't find anything else that's better than this, right, on TV. So,
Seinfeld's not on.
One of the things that I really hope that we can accomplish moving forward is I want to come up with a process. And I appreciate, by the way, I really like this, and my recommendation is going to be that we give this a shot. We use this type of a format as a checklist to say, okay, where does this fit? Because what I'd really like to see is staff and the city manager feeling more comfortable and confident of moving things forward to us for approval, where more frequently than not, their recommendation is what council will decide, where it seems like lately, a lot of times, staff is bringing forward, as they should, based on the way we've been doing things, and saying, they recommend not approval, and of course, council's proving 5-0, and that's happened pretty regularly, I think. And so I want to make sure we can all get in on the same sheet of music, so to speak, and have the same vision, and that staff and the city manager's office is comfortable in helping get us into our vision more frequently. And I get that you're right, there's no way to come up with something that's going to fit 100% of the time. All right, that being said, a couple of things I wanted to talk about real quick. Bouncing back to fees for a minute, pay-to-play fees in our athletic programs. Does everybody who plays, regardless if they're residents of the city of Port Orange, pay the same fee, or do we have different fees for different sports? I know Alan had shown it looked like maybe Ormond, depends on the sport what the fee is, where I think ours is more the same fee regardless of whether it's soccer, baseball, or whatever. Can you speak to that for me?
Sure. Susan Val, Parks and Recreation Director. One thing to note is the city of Ormond Beach is they run parent-run sports programs there.
Say that one more time?
They have parent-run sports programs.
Okay.
So how that works is the city of Ormond registers all the children for the program. Then it's turned over to their Golden Spikes, let's say, for baseball.
Okay.
Then the city gets a cut of that fee. So $100, 30% of that, I think it's 30%. It might have changed, but 30% will go back to the city. So they do it a little bit different. So it's not apples to apples when you start to compare it. The way we do our fee structure, you asked about, we used to charge a non-resident fee. If you did not live within the city limits of Port Orange, you paid an additional 15% when I first came to Port Orange. Well, with the installation of Echo, if you built any of your facilities with Echo money, you could not charge that differential fee any longer. So we kind of got away from that. We took a look at our demographics through our registration to see what percent of the children are coming from outside of our city. And it equates to it's just under 10%. So we have 652 kids signed up for baseball this year. So 65 of those are coming. So it's not a huge number that would impact that great. As we start looking at capping our programs and things of that nature, those are things that then we would go back and say, okay, if we open up registration for an entire month, the first 3 weeks, we're only going to register Port Orange residents. And then at that last week, we'll open it up. And if there's any spots left, we'll take the non-residents. That would be the only difference we would see. We're not there yet. We're very close, but we're not there yet. But our fee is $70. We went to $70 for youth sports. We're looking at raising that fee. We were waiting to see what happened in the workshop tonight for all sports. In 2007, we started researching our sports programs and trying to see what we recovered on each sport. So baseball costs a lot more to operate than basketball or soccer. More uniforms, more equipment, there's just more costs. So instead of charging baseball $125 and charging basketball $50, we went to $70 and put youth sports as one grouping. It's one budget, they're not budgeted separately. And then try to work our numbers that way, which worked better, and it seemed to also work for our parents better. So that was our philosophy when we went into our fee structures the way it is today. So I hope that answers your question. If you have any other ones, I'll be happy to
Excuse me.
answer those.
Can you please talk to council about the administrative burden of delineating between,
Right.
if you have 652 kids, you got to check their
Right.
address and.
Yeah.
Right.
So, so another reason for the non-resident fee going away from it too was you can't just take someone's driver's license and know that they live in Port Orange or not in Port Orange by the Port Orange address, because we all know everybody lives in the Fly-In and some other areas are not in our city limits, but they think they're Port Orange residents because they have Port Orange. So we would have to have a database that we got from our utility department that staff would have to look through the addresses to see where they lived. It was very time consuming. And again, for the little bit of people we had in the program, we didn't think it was cost effective to try and capture that.
I would only comment on that. So part of my interest would be that with the numbers that Alan shows us, let's say for a minute that we've got a 27% user fee overall that the users are paying in, and then that means the balance of that 73%, if the math works out right, that sounds about right, are covered by ad valorem taxes. So in other fees. I guess what I'm thinking is when someone who's not a taxpayer family comes into our city, still pays the 27, they're not participating in that other 73%. And so that was something I wanted to ask about, and I'm not sure what our options are there. I just want to say that I'm not opposed for non-resident families coming in to participate in these programs, considering a higher fee. Something realistic, but I don't think that's unreasonable, knowing those numbers which really pays for the programs as a whole. And so there is it's a cost spread across the tax base. Not everybody's going to come play baseball, but yet they're going to pay a little bit more to also have the user fee. But then you've got your folks coming in from all over the county to participate. And I get that the numbers are, let's say they're 10%. So just something to think about as you guys are looking at that again and make your recommendations. I certainly appreciate how complex it could be to identify the residency thing. I don't know if that's somehow we put the burden back on that person to say, look, when you come to register, you got to have this, and this. I know just to go get your driver's license renewed, you got to bring 3 forms of the water bill, the tax bill, the FP&L bill,
Birth
and
certificate,
yeah,
your
right.
Social
I mean,
Security
it's kind of
card.
crazy. I don't want to get it to that degree, but if you guys can come up with something, I think it's worth discussing. So just keep that in mind with your staff. So that was one of the items I wanted to bring up. Also, I think that one of the issues that I know I've had to speak to with residents that have asked about waivers of fees is there seems to be a terminology issue. When we say fees were waived or fees weren't waived, it doesn't really explain what was and wasn't covered or not covered. And that's where I think Alan and I had this conversation a couple weeks ago, where I think we need to really look at identifying and speaking to whether we're talking about facility fees or are we talking about staff time fees and services, and making sure we're clear as a council what exactly is being waived, because there are times where we waive the use of the park, the fee, but yet they're still paying whatever those rates are for police and fire and your staff and so forth and so on. So the terminology aspect of that, and to be clear, somehow may be beneficial moving forward when residents ask us, well, I heard you waived all the fees. Well, we didn't waive all the fees. We waived the fee to use the facility, which if we didn't have the event, wouldn't get used at all this weekend. However, they're still recovering or paying for the cost for staff and services and things like that. So just something else to kind of think about. When we look at these events, I guess I'm transitioning away from some of the recreational stuff, but or athletics rather. When we look at some of these events, I agree with what Bob was saying. I think that council has at least shown in action that we are looking for good events that invite the whole city, that there's things to do in our community. I know for years I used to hear I got to go to New Smyrna to go to an event, I got to go to the Casements in Ormond to go to the event, I got to go to DeLand, and that's all great, and I myself enjoy going to other cities' events and checking out what they've got going on, and that's great. But I just want to make sure we have our fair share of events, which is, I think, is what council has been trying to work towards over the last few years for sure. I know that increases burden on you and your staff for planning and operational aspects, and it seems like we're working through that and we're getting a little bit better. I know there will be some frustrations, but in the matrix that Alan put together, that's a big one for me. Is it an event that we view and say, this is about Port Orange, right? This is the Port Orange style event. You know, it's good family fun. There's something for everybody. It brings the community together. Those types of aspects in there. The nonprofit thing, I want to make sure that the nonprofit groups that come looking for waivers, that they're truly attached to our community. We've seen some really great nonprofits that do a lot of stuff and give back, right back into the community, a lot of money and a lot of services. And of course, I welcome that. I think it's another great part of being in the city of Port Orange. And I think it's what the vision of council is, to look for groups that want to come and put on events. And even though they're raising money, that money that they're raising is specifically coming back into the community. So in your matrix, Alan, I think that we just may want to at least have something in place there, should it be a nonprofit that's really not affiliated or based in the city of Port Orange or registered in the city of Port Orange. And, you know, while some residents may benefit, maybe it's just a bigger and broader spectrum, just something to think about as to where that funding goes. I mean, Family Days is a great example, and then even some of our, you know, local, I know that you've got Relay for Life, which is a national event, but with a very specific local tie and a local group that's participating in that. So just something to think about there. What else did I have here? Just to throw in a plug, the event that Bob was talking about, for those watching at home or may watch the review, that's going to be the Riverfest on the Halifax event, May 4th through the 6th. And that should be our first significant size event, I'm guessing, for the Riverwalk area. So that should be pretty, other than the grand opening, which was really great, by the way.
And by the way, the fees on that have not been waived.
Right.
We agreed, and we're working with the Chamber and the
Sure.
Rotary on that. So,
Right.
so I just want to be clear that they're not getting fees waived. They'll get a discount, similar to something like Family Days or something like that.
Okay.
So.
Okay. So let's see if we've got some public comments, and then we'll come back to the staff. Did you want to chime in real quick? Go ahead.
Yeah, just before, because I appreciated what you said about defining the fees and educating on that, and that's something I'm going to be interested in, because there's some fees I'm more interested in waiving, and some I'm less. Certainly, when we point out the cost of staff, that eats a lot, and those are ones I'm not as, I would be almost hard pressed to want to waive those, and I might even suggest a different matrix for that. I don't know.
If I can speak to the staffing real quick.
Please do.
So we look at, like Alan said, we look at trying to move staff around. But if you take some of these events that are, like the Riverfest coming up, it's going to be Saturday and Sunday. Staff will be there about 15 hours, which is a long day. So that's 30 hours if a staff person works. So if I schedule them so they don't have overtime, that's 30 hours next week that they're not here, and we have programs going. That's our struggle, is that come Monday, baseball's on, and fields have to be ready, and staff has to be there to run those games. So that has always been our struggle, is how do we manage the amount of hours? We can get away with a 4 or 5 hour event and be okay, but the larger events that we're having to be there a lot and taking most of our staff, it's hard to schedule those out. Now, we could cancel games Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We could do that. I wouldn't recommend it, but because those people want to play baseball, so everybody wants to do their thing. They don't care there's an event on Saturday. They want to play baseball on Monday, and so that's where we struggle. And quite frankly, the burnout, we start to see staff to call in sick on Friday because they're exhausted because they haven't had a day off. And we go sometimes 21 days without a day off. So it stretches like that. But we do our best to try to rotate staff. Not as much, we look for the cost, but also just for staff burnout. There's many times when our staff has worked, 2-3 weeks in a row with no time off. And that's not healthy to keep long term either. So that's another thing we try and balance, is to make sure that doesn't happen.
Let me ask you this, from a perspective, real quick, if you could speak to an event like Family Days, stuff that's going to be going on at Riverwalk. Give us an idea of what it is staff's doing during the event, when the event's up and running.
Okay.
Because the reason why I'm going to ask you is are there any cities that are using like private organizations that could be contracted to come in and do those things, and would that alleviate some of that pressure on your staff? I think of like when you go to a concert or a college or pro football game, you see that there's organizations that private contractors are brought in because local staff can't handle everything, and they're doing either parking or they're doing keeping the restrooms clean throughout the day and things like that. I mean, is that an option? Are cities doing that, or not so much?
So it is an option, and we've tried it. So
Okay.
we went through a time where, for one, we have the VIPs, right? So we use
Sure.
the VIPs to cover barricades. There's so many shifts though, because these events are so long. We don't have enough VIPs to cover them.
Got it.
So then we're bringing in public works employees to cover those barricades, because what we have found out is that a barricade by itself, you might as well not have
Not
it.
a barricade.
Okay, so that's something we learned. We have worked with Family Days and other organizations for them to take up some of the cleanup. They did it one year, and they're like, we just don't have the capacity to keep up with it. They do hire restroom attendants that keep the restrooms clean. That's one less thing we have to do.
Okay.
So we've scaled back in those areas. And again, I can only really speak pretty much for Parks and Rec, because public safety is a whole nother matrix they look at on how they make sure we're safe. But generally, when we come in, we're the first people there usually and last people to leave. Okay, so our first thing is make sure that the site is secure. Barricades are where they need to be, the trash cans get emptied, the dumpsters get emptied because they have to be emptied during a big event like Family Days. They do a clean over, they make sure everything is safe from the night before, that now that it's daylight you can see a little bit better. They're checking for the holes and the cords that have come down and all those things. And then of course my staff through most of the event is handling power issues. So the vendors who have power, if any of it trips, they trip breakers. They're handling all of the trash cleanup off the ground. So they're constantly going around picking up trash off the ground. They're emptying all the cans. We put out about 50 cans in the circle, usually for an event, on top of the 20-something permanent cans we already have. So that's a constant thing all day long. Of course, depending on what's going on and what activities we have to turn lights on, turn lights off, move signboards around, no parking signs, dealing with some of our like the YMCA in Palmer and the church. We'll get calls from them because people are parked in the wrong place. We go over and handle all that. So it just depends. And quite frankly, and just in case something bad, like bad weather, things like that, then the job gets even harder, right?
Sure.
So tents start blowing in the lake and things are blowing over and we got to get people out of there because we have lightning everywhere. I mean, all that takes people to go around and make sure that that's happening. And then when everything closes down, they make sure everything's tightened up for the night, so that's safe. And then PD has the overnight to make sure that everything stays where it's supposed to stay. So.
Do you have access to interns from local colleges? And what I look at Family Days involvement. I know I know our weightlifters at Spruce Creek help a lot, but I understand they get a little money for that as well, doing that, right?
Yes.
I look at the fees that were waived for the football team. You got like 100 people in that program. Have they from Spruce Creek? Is that something that we can look into? For example, for that particular one, say, okay, you're going to get this waived, but you're going to work this event. Will stuff like that help alleviate and giving an advertising for service hours and things of that nature?
Yeah, so it will help, but what works so well with the weightlifters is they have a coach that comes with them.
Multiple,
So
usually.
yeah, and really that's important. We're trying to handle staff. We're trying to handle logistics. We're trying to handle the command center, making sure everybody's where they're supposed to be, and then trying to handle 50 or 60 high school kids is a full-time job, as you know. You do it every day, right? So, so that's what I think helps them. The other problem is most of our setup for a lot of this stuff happens during the school day. So we can't get them, and you'll see Family Days struggle with that sometimes where they'll come in, they'll start on Wednesday night trying to set up tents because they can't get there until after the school lets out and they get out of practice or whatever they may be doing. But we always look for volunteers. We try and get as many interns as we can. We don't get as many as we would like to, but a lot of the students that go to some of the schools here aren't from here. And when it comes intern time for college, they generally go back to where they're from. So a lot of the ones we've gotten they live in our area. So.
And we're going to go to public comments, but I just want to compliment you and your staff. As I asked that question, it's merely because I want to explore all the opportunities
Sure.
and options that may be available to us. One of the things that I really appreciate that your staff does a great job is during the course of the event, picking trash up and keeping the canisters emptied. I mean, it's almost Disney-like, which is great. And by the way, that doesn't occur at everybody's city events. There are places I've been to where the mindset is, okay, we start at 8, we'll pick up garbage after the event's done. That includes the containers and everything piles up real quick and it's laying all over the place. And so that's fabulous what
Well,
your
thank
staff
you. I
does. I do
appreciate
not
that.
want to change that in the least. And I think it shows. I mean, it's so quick. You can be at family days, be 30,000 people out there, and your staff's walking around picking stuff up off the ground almost nonstop.
Right.
And so I think that's incredible, and we want to continue to do that. I just want to make sure we explore any other opportunities. That
Get
might
them to
be
the point where they're all wearing white gloves and they have to.
Yeah, right.
Two
say
finger
where to
point?
go,
Very
Two
good.
finger
So.
point.
All right, let's go
Trash over
to
there.
public comments. Anybody from the public want to speak? No? Come on, Bobby. You showed up tonight. Come on, man. Got some kind of robot or something that picks up trash? What do you got, man?
Bobby, 5960 Kendrew. I just want to say I think Alan misses calling. He's probably an engineer in his real life,
Yeah.
and he just doesn't know it yet.
He's not available for hire. Go ahead. What's your next
But I
question?
love all the presentation. Just I wanted to answer Chase's comment or question about family days. My wife manages or handles the command center at Lakeside Center during the days. All 3 days she's there at walkie-talkies and she's talking to Sue and everybody else. And she probably gets several hundred volunteers from Riddle, Daytona State, the high schools. They all come through and they disperse them in different locations to do parking attendance and trash pickup and you name it. Anything they could do, they're doing. So I know they've worked real closely with the local groups to do that as well. It's just as a comment, but I think your presentation was good, and I think having a little bit of structure to what you guys are trying to do is probably a good thing.
Good. Thank you, Bob. John?
John Cameron, 1873 Corpash Lane, Port Orange. I too work in a recreation department for the city of Daytona Beach. So I'm very familiar with what Susan's talking about with long hours and lots of events spread very thin. So my thoughts are this, that when Susan or Matt or anyone puts forth a request for staffing, that you really consider it very seriously. She mentioned the burnout rate. Spreading thin, 21 days without a break, it's pretty tough to deal with. And it seems like days just mold one after the other. Volunteers are great as long as they do a limited capacity. If you put them in charge of an event, it will diminish in quality. So my other thoughts are, if you're going to consider waiving fees, that you be very careful about that, because all the fees that you waive take away staff, the ability to hire staff and staff events properly, and could erode quality events. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else? Good. Did you want to follow up on something?
One more thing. Thank you for the feedback and the comments, and we'll try to incorporate as best we can some of that stuff and see how that kicks out when it comes to you for the next time when somebody asks for a waiver, and we'll keep working on it to make sure we get as best we can. One of the two things I wanted to mention was, in trying to weigh things the same way, and when things come before council as a contract versus a one-off, when I say you want to treat them the same, the only difference there on our logistics side is budgeting. Of course, if we've got a contract, we know, like family days, we budget for that because we know it's coming. The one-offs are hard for us. That the $7,000, and again, $7,000 in a pool of $33 million is not a big deal. But logistically, we just we'll try to look back in the past and look in the future and figure out what we need to budget to make sure we're covered for that.
This year will be a pretty good indicator with Riverwalk coming up, and and we're sending a lot over there. And if the reduced fees keep coming, that'll give us a good indication through the year to budget. But that's I think my main concern is that I want to accurately budget for it. And we've talked about staffs or departments absorbing the cost. We could also do that, but it's less transparent than accounting for it and knowing where our money is or isn't coming from and going to. And so Susan, next year, based on a little bit of what we see this year, we'll be able to adjust the revenue to account for what we won't get based on what we saw this year, and then project out next year.
And the other thing is, just want to request a little bit of direction. I think I kind of know where council's going. In one of the next couple of meetings, the fee resolution is coming to council. And so in order to give staff proper direction in terms of what to provide to you, are you still okay at a very high level at staying between like 28-30% fee recovery across the board for Parks and Recreation? If that's the case, that's the fee resolution that will come before you to try to hit that sweet spot.
I'll let them each speak to that. I like the 30% benchmark. I'd like to shoot for 30. I think that's a fair benchmark looking at what else is going on there for now. And so yeah, and maybe each council member too can also weigh in if you like the matrix concept that Alan's presenting here, and do we want to at least use that for now and move forward with that. And obviously, I'd ask that you speak with the mayor too and hear his thoughts, and I know he'll have them. Chase?
Good.
Like 30% as a benchmark? Rob, what do you think?
I guess 30% is okay. I just have.
We could do 29.9.
Yeah, we could do 29.
Well, it's a benchmark.
I have a broader sense that I really don't want the city to get into the. Don't want us to get too heavy into a fee-based system. I believe we provide services for all our public, and when you start putting a lot of fees onto it, changing the scope, the sense of what we're doing. The second concern I have is sometimes, like with the centers we have, we enter into direct competition with the private sector, which is a concern. I think we need to avoid that as much as we can, and that particularly occurs when we have places like the Lakeside Center, which may be competing with restaurants and other things for, those type of events. So I think we need to keep in the back of our mind as both a council and as a government, we're not one, becoming an enterprise, and two, we'd like very much not to compete as much as we can with those who pay the taxes in the city. So there's two observations.
I don't know that there's a whole lot of private venues in Port Orange from a private perspective where you could do 50, 70, 80 people at an event in a private. Maybe there's a
pavilion. Well, not private. The chamber rents
but
theirs
but
for
fully
hotels.
a private, like a restaurant, for
And,
example. I don't know that.
The
Well,
train,
there
the train
isn't-
station.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, there's one down there in your district, in the River District.
Yep.
But it may well be because it'd be very hard to get started with one,
Sure.
given all the competition
Perhaps.
we provide. I don't know. I do know, for example, one of the things when we started the Y in Port Orange, we put out of business another recreation who complained to me
Continental.
mightily. Yes, I remember that. So we always had to be sensitive to that.
Good.
Drew?
Yeah, that 30, that's roughly a third. That's probably reasonable and acceptable to me.
That mostly addresses athletic fees, right?
Yeah, I think
Mostly
that,
not.
yeah, mostly, I think it'll relate to special events as well that will hit Public Works and police as well, but generally it's mostly you're talking Parks and Rec type activities.
Okay.
That's what I'm talking. When their fee resolution comes to you, I think that's what they're going to aim for is let's try to get it back about 30% of our costs and the rest balance
We
out.
do a lot of individual fee waivers, as I understand it, in sports for children that cannot afford
We do have
we
our
have scholarship.
scholarship program.
scholarship program. Okay.
Yeah, so our scholarship program, we don't have 100% fee waivers on any of them. The most you can earn is 75%, and then we do a volunteer back program after that, where the parents actually volunteer in our concession stands to pay that off hourly. It's a good program.
Sure.
And it's funded through the Mayor's Golf Tournament and our concession stands and our snack machine over at the gym. So it works out pretty well. We do about $3,000 a year in waivers to Port Orange children.
Outstanding. Good. Anything else you need from us?
I have one. I'd like
Yes.
Consensus just to make sure. I think I have it, but I'd like to make sure that because we went down this road once, I want to make sure liability insurance shall not ever be waived.
Correct.
I agree. I think that the liability insurance needs to be
It's a dangerous place for the city to be
right.
dancing. Yeah.
And typically, the liability insurance for those events isn't all that much, and it's easier to probably keep our hands out of that. I know we've kind of maybe gone there a couple of times, but I think moving forward, that's probably one that I think we're best served. Don't wait there. You agree?
Got it.
Drew? Bob?
Yeah, liability, never.
Okay. Anything else, Jake, you need on that
No,
one?
I'm good, man.
Anything for you?
Thank you.
Good? Okay. Thanks. Item number 6, city manager evaluation. It's been a year already?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. You want to evaluate yourself first, or?
No, sir.
No, sir. All right.
My brag sheet is a public record.
I got you. All right, Bob, we'll start with you tonight.
Thanks. I find evaluating someone in public as at least very difficult for me. Always been trained to praise in public, criticize in private. On the other hand, I do understand under transparency, the public has a right to know what people are thinking. I'm going to keep my comments pretty general. Specific concerns I have will be addressed privately, and generally, in making my comments, I realize we're dealing with a city manager who has come from a very different organization to this one, and over the last 2 years, 3 years, 2.5 years, I have gradually understood how cultures are different between municipalities and the federal government. So a lot of my concerns are gradually dissipating as the manager transposes and begins to move more to a municipal type approach than the federal approach he was quite used to, or military approach. The other thing, I'm going to make some contradictory remarks, because very often we're going to find out that a person's strengths are often their weaknesses. It's called a dialectic in philosophy, but here it just means that sometimes someone can be too compassionate, which is a very good thing. On the other hand, there can be some negatives, because maybe you don't act in as strong a manner as you should out of compassion. My first concern is transparency. I think we have made some positives in the area of transparency, and I give an example is the the weekly, bi-weekly report, which has been very useful to understand what's going on in the city, and I think that's important. However, on the whole, I think the city and the city manager need to pay more attention to transparency. Our city emails, which used to be open to the public and right online, they're gone. Phone calls from the manager to at least city council, at least to me, I can only speak to my own private experiences, have declined over the last year. I would like to have more active communication, more timely communication. And of course, like all of us, you hate reading things in the newspaper that about your city you didn't know. So again, I think transparency and open communication could be improved. There are some really good aspects, but overall, I would like to see some improvements in that area. One area I've seen in the last month or two a real improvement in is the role of council versus the role of the city manager. There's been a dynamic tension that I've experienced with the manager on what exactly is the role of council. The role of council is to determine policy. The role of the manager is to run operations and to operationalize those policies. Unhappily, that distinction becomes difficult in practice because where operation ends and where policy begins is a very vague area. And some things can be interpreted as policy or they can be interpreted as operation. We've really spent a little time, probably a little too much energy, in clashing over the role of operations versus policy. And what I recommend, and I'm seeing some movement in that direction, is that the council and the manager need to be on the same page, that we need to stop worrying about whose turf is whose and start thinking about a team approach where we work together to achieve common goals. And I do see some movement in that direction. Also, on the issue of conflict, as I think I'm not speaking out of school, I think everyone saw it, considerable clash over the budget this past year. I hope such a clash does not occur in the future, and I personally will make efforts myself to avoid that type of confrontation that we saw this year. The manager's passions to do a great job are very real, and those passions sometimes can lead to conflict. That's the bad side of the good. Two things about budget. It is the manager's duty to present the budget. It's council's duty to fund the budget and decide at what level. It's a difficult process. There's a lot of disagreements within council. It's very hard on the manager. But I do say that one of the things we need to do as a manager is to accept that that the council is often going to go in directions that are not appreciated by staff. That is to be expected, and I just urge, and there will be conflict, there's no way to avoid that, but at a certain point when the decision is made, we need to go on to the next problem and not worry about that one. We spent too much time this past year trying to deal with the budget. It goes on and on and on. It was done, and it needed to be buried and go on to new things. Citizen relations, I've seen a lot of effort and improvement in developing a staff that is citizen-centric and tries very much to work, and the managers to be complimented on those efforts. We still have little pockets, and living on the east side, unhappily, I run into those pockets all the time. They call me. I think we, for this coming year, really need to spend the final thrust to get us over the top on citizen relationships and how do we build a citizen-centric organization. And I know it's not hard, it's not easy. So just a little more do it. Customer service, we need very hard to work on customer service. We need to make sure that the quality of people there, their salaries, and the like be commensurate with the type of job they do, because they are the front door of the department of the city. They're the people that people meet. We very much need to address that in the coming year. A lot has been done, just more needs to be done. Budget, I hope this year the budget will, I hope both council and the manager have learned this coming year about the budget and how can we build a budget that is less conflicted and less argumented than the past one. So I'm looking for, some improvements on the budget, maybe early talks with the different councilmen to make sure that a good sense of where we're going from all council is put together in the budget. We're doing really well in a whole series of areas. However, I do think there are a few areas, I've talked to the manager in the past, that we still need to spend some attention to, a few departments. Overall, I think motion, quality of product, the amount of time it takes to field a product has improved, but there's a few areas left, as one would expect, that more needs to be done. Those are my comments for the moment.
Okay, thank you. Chase? Thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I don't have as much as Councilman Ford did. I appreciated all his comments. I'll sing the same tune as I did last year. I always look at a person's leadership based upon the people they surround themselves with, and throughout the course of the year, I try to interact as much as I can with staff going through manager's office, of course, and I'm always impressed. And I, even when I have disagreements from time to time with what certain departments may want to go through and may want to pursue, I respect the passion and the way in which the job is approached. And to me, that's attitude reflects leadership. My interactions with the entire city manager staff, anytime I've needed something, I've gotten it. Information I've requested, it's there. I think one of the first things that when I was running for office, I always heard from people how messed up and the history has been in contention between city manager and council. I haven't experienced that. I have a positive viewpoint of it. I've had the time of my life up here, and I think a lot of that has to do with the connection that council has among themselves, but also the chemistry with the manager and his staff. So I'm a praiser, and I'll continue to do exactly that. And one comment. Whenever we go to Tallahassee, I will say this, I think having been with Jake, having been with Alan, our managerial staff represent us with great dignity and professionalism up in Tallahassee. So I'm proud when they're representing us. And they've been on the ball and out front on numerous things. I love what's going on with Riverwalk. I think Jake has been on the front lines, with the full court press on that. I like hearing the updates that come forth with that. So those are my comments. I'm pleased, and I'm ready to continue to move forward. Have another good year.
Drew?
Yeah, mine will be short too. I don't have the comments that Bob did. I filled out the evaluation that we were presented, turned it in. I'll tell everybody it's available. If anybody wants to see it, we're not hiding anything. Come and request it, and you can review it. So I don't need. I gave him very good and excellent ratings in virtually every category. The team that he's building and that he's surrounding him. He inherited a team when he got here. People left, retired, went on to different jobs, and he's building the team. And I'm impressed with the hires that he's making, the results that he's getting, and the things that are happening. Riverwalk's moving forward. We acquired some property that was, his doing. It was put together quickly. Staff did a great job. Margaret Legal, the whole thing came together, and we were able to close some properties and pick up some key properties down there that went pretty quickly. It happened all of a sudden. So, like I said, I'm happy with the results that he's doing. I don't have any clashes with him. When I come to him with something, him or staff gives results, and I can't really ask for anything more. Him and I had a good meeting, going over the evaluation, and so I don't think it's fair to anybody to have their good job or bad, to have their evaluation reviewed in public. Like I said, I'm not trying to hide anything. If anybody wants it, they're welcome to come and view it and see it. And he got good marks. So for me, like I said, I like the direction we're heading. There's always room for improvement, and he seems to be motivated to do that and produce even better results. So we're heading in a good direction, and we have a quality leader, for sure.
Anything else?
No, sir.
Bob, first I want to say I'm a little concerned about any diminished contention that could hurt our TV ratings. So,
Yeah, they're not
Careful.
tuning in.
Okay,
They're not
yeah,
exciting
let's
enough.
be careful where we go.
We can't
there.
lose our 12 viewers.
Jake, first, one of the things that 2 years already.
Over.
It's like I think like a
two.
couple
Yeah.
couple
2.5.
months. 2.5
Yeah.
total. Wow. Time flies when you're having fun in the city of Fort Orange, right?
Cindy points out that I'm the second longest city manager in Port Orange. Since
Yeah,
There you have it.
Yeah,
There you have it.
you are.
Yeah. In the fact that Cindy's still sticking around and being there in the office probably
Yeah,
speaks
I
highly. I
can't
don't know.
figure that out either.
Anyhow, so a couple of comments for you. First of all, one of the things I want to mention is I think that with Port Orange, when a city manager comes to take that seat, it's more about it's not just about him alone. And one of the things I do want to highly compliment you on is the way that you have immersed your family as a whole into the community, and how everyone in your family, all your children and your wife, serve the community and represent the community as a whole. So my compliments for that, and I think that benefits us in a lot of different ways. I think it also gives you unique insight into what's going on in our schools and our nonprofits and our athletics and things like that, because you're not only overseeing those, but you're a participant in those, and I think that's highly beneficial, and I applaud you for that. Getting Riverwalk up and running and off the ground was something that this council and many councils before us
Yep.
looked forward to and made efforts to do for a really, really long time. And I distinctly remember during the interview with you saying, if you hire me, we will get that off the ground. We will do that. We will get it launched. We'll get it open. And certainly that has occurred. So congratulations on that. You've been an integral part in doing that, and as well as your staff and council. I also want to compliment, Chase, you brought it up, one of my notes. One of the things that is very pleasing to me, that I'm excited about, is to have somebody that goes to Tallahassee like Jake does, and his staff and his connections, and fight as hard as they do in Port Orange. Some years are tougher than others at the state level to try to bring back dollars to the community. But I can tell you, from going up there and doing that and being involved in that process, who you send up there and their ability to walk into those offices and have those very open and frank discussions with your state legislators and your state senators, it's very, very important. And having seen Jake go and do that now a couple of times, I can tell you that it's been very beneficial, and I think it will be very more beneficial in the future years to come, because he is making great strides in relationships. And when you go to Tallahassee, it's not always what you bring forth up there. It's about the relationships that you're building up there, and knowing who is who and what needs to be, who you need to get in front of. And Jake has been successful in doing that. Year was an interesting year. You had a lot on your plate internally with staff. We not only had contracts that needed to be resolved, and which I thought was actually a very smooth process this year, and fair, and positive strides were made that hadn't been made in a while, and I'm very happy to see that. So my compliments not only to you, but your staff that was involved, and to your leadership. to get that moving, and to throw a wrench in there as if we needed it. You also had a transition of a large union at the same time, which at first, when I heard that, I really thought, man, this is just going to drag out and drag out and drag out, and the transition would have a lot of bumps in the road, and that didn't materialize. It was actually relatively smooth, much smoother than I had kind of anticipated it might be. So good work on that as well for you and your staff. And clearly, you know, when I'm complimenting you, that a lot of times, and I know how you feel. I get it. It's the folks that are working with you on your team, and they deserve as much of those compliments as you do. Staff and personnel decisions, you've had to make some pretty tough ones over the last 2.5 years. I don't think it's actually, are you just now getting to the point where I think really,
Don't say that.
everybody knock. Yeah, don't say it, right? But I feel like, honestly, you're finally getting to the point now where you've got a team. You've got players, you've got a team, you've got a staff, and everybody seems to be working towards those common goals and visions. And I think some of the changes that you've made and people that you've put in strategic positions are paying off and being beneficial to the city as a whole. I think you've done a pretty good job there as well. I guess my only critique that I would like to see that I'm going to mention right now moving forward is something maybe Bob spoke a little bit of, and to be quite honest, I guess we share some of this as well, so this is not necessarily solely a critique for you, but I would like to see moving forward in the next year, what can we do as a team to improve the overall environment between us and the city manager, and back and forth, and with staff. It seems like there are times where things are a little contentious and don't necessarily need to be, and I want to see what we can do moving forward to try to work on that. I think we can, and I think we already have. I think there's been some strides made in that, and I think that some of that is very, very common whenever you have a lot of people that are very passionate about a city like Port Orange, and everybody's trying to do the very best thing they can, and sometimes everybody thinks that's their idea that's the very best one, and it's not always that person's idea. It ends up being a compilation of everybody's ideas and passions, and so that's not necessarily a bad thing, and I look forward to more of that in the coming year. I will say that speaking personally, I truly appreciate you always finding the opportunity and the time to stop what you're doing when I really need to talk with you about an issue that's going on. And I love the fact that you're very candid in those conversations. I will say that you've been very open and direct when need be, and very appropriate in getting information to me. Sometimes I realize it's sensitive, and there are times when honestly, I don't want to know all the details right then and there. And I think you've done a good job at that, and then following up accordingly when those details are available. So, anybody have anything else they want to open? Anybody from the public want to make any comments? Any staff members want to come up and? No, I'm just kidding. We won't do that part.
John Cameron, 1873 Corpash in Port Orange. I'd like to echo the sentiments of the council. I think Mr. Johansson's done a great job. I think me working for a city, there's always going to be friction between the manager and the council or elected officials. It's just the nature of the beast. I will relate to you one story. I was chairing a meeting of the Golf Advisory Board, and we were talking about a contentious issue between the HOA and the golf course and what the city's going to do with it and stuff like that. And I had met with the city attorney, and I'd reported, and there was a lot of back and forth about what was said, and I kind of dug myself a little hole there, and Mr. Johansson was there, and he saw my dilemma, and he quickly jumped in, and he helped me out big time. So he took it off my shoulders, and he said, I will meet with the HOAs, I will talk to you, I will address your concerns, and we will find a solution. So I think he's a great guy. He really helped me out. So, again, I'm very appreciative of what he did that night, and I can see a lot of progress in how the city's moved forward. And he also has a really sweet ride. So.
You know, as a city manager, I think it'd be fair to say he's been surprisingly adequate. What do you think?
Well, considering the fact that I don't think he has a whole lot of experience prior to this job, I believe his career Navy, is that right?
Oh,
And this is his first job as a city official or city manager, or does he have any kind of experience before running a city?
Base installation commander, very similar with some caveats, I would say. So,
But, again, not involved in city government, doesn't
not
understand the nuances and subtleties of elected officials and things like that. I think he's done a pretty remarkable job. And I've known a lot of city managers in my career, and a lot of them are very guarded, and they have a tendency to step back and put the elected officials up front because they're the policymakers. They represent the citizens, and that's the way it ought to be. But Mr. Johansson has put himself out there. I've seen him, in restaurants, interacting with people. He has meets with coffee. He has lunch. He's visible, doesn't hide. So
The only main problem we have that he has to do something about are those socks.
They're rubbing off on me.
that's a very flash in style.
Yeah, he's setting a trend.
I mean, when you're dressed in blue for 35 years, I mean, that's the color you
The
pick,
socks,
right?
yeah. They tell you.
You don't have much flair, So anyway, thank you very much, and appreciate the time
Thanks
to
for
speak.
comments, John. Bobby?
I'll be real quick. Bobby, 5960 Kinder. Just to reiterate something Drew mentioned, as everybody knows, there's always room for improvement, and I think you all know that, and I think Jake would probably acknowledge that too, as far as the job he's done, the job he can do. As far as I think Chase and Scott, I think you both mentioned relationship with staff, and I've talked to a lot of your staff a lot of times, and one of the key quotes that I heard not too long ago was from one of your senior management was, "I drink his Kool-Aid every day," which is a pretty cool story. Pretty cool. It says a lot right there as far as what they're doing and the relationship they have with the city manager. So, but the last thing and the real important thing that I really wanted to say was, I've sat back here for a lot of years and watched a lot of embarrassing city council meetings, and just overall, the entire demeanor that you have now as a council is a lot stronger, a lot different than you were, 3, 5, 10 years ago. We had some positive city managers, we had some not so positive city managers. Same goes for the council. But what I think you can do right now is you can step back, if you take a step back in a moment and think about it, you're playing a lot more offense than you were, 2 years ago. 2 years ago, you were playing a whole lot of defense about absolutely everything that came before you, and now you're playing a lot of offense. So I just think that's a positive thing to say about which the gentleman you have with you.
I agree.
Thank you.
And Bobby, you made me think of one more thing that I did want to mention too, is not only the relationship with the staff and the council as well, but also community partners that are involved in businesses or nonprofits and our church groups and our schools and things like that. I think the relationships that you've established and continue to grow are evident almost every single day. And there's been some great strategy there in fostering those relationships that I think that a lot of people in the community are going to see over the next couple of years how those things really will come together and benefit us as we move forward as a city. So, anybody else? Oh, this ought to be good. Did I also mention how much I appreciate you keeping the slideshow presentations of the assistant city manager down to those bare minimums? And
All right, forget it.
no, go ahead. Come on, what you got?
That's probably highly unusual to have a staff member, I guess, come up and comment on
We're
this
an
matter.
unusual city. We're
Unique by choice.
Regular, Dave.
But no, I just it's been an interesting ride from David Harden to the city manager now. Nobody was sure.
Same personality.
Yeah, completely different. Nobody was sure what we were going to get, but I've only been here 6 months, I think, longer than Jake, and having the pleasure of being here working with him has been great. I mean, I can't speak for other staff, but I think most of them feel the same way. That just being able to sit in the room and watch him lead a discussion or lead the organization is a learning experience for myself, and I think for other people. Drawing on all those years of experience with leadership in the Navy and bringing that to bear, even though it's a completely different type of organization. Every day I come to work, I see as an opportunity, another opportunity to learn something new from him and the way he handles people and situations, and I very much appreciate that, and so just want to throw that in there.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
One real quick thing. This is a Jake evaluation, but my hats off to you, Alan. I think we're doubly blessed having you on staff. Having taken the trip to Tallahassee with you, spending that time and watching you in action, and I frankly call you a heck of a lot as well, and to get feedback and get input from you. And I think you're best kept secret in Volusia County, and I hope you're here for a long time as well.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Alan.
Please.
You all good? All right. Oh, go ahead.
No, I have a few comments. So, you are right that we are very, very blessed to have the department head team and city attorney team that we have here. Those relationships I've been able to develop that have moved this city forward, the Riverwalk properties that we just acquired, the monkey business that's going on now that's going to move us forward down there, and all that. I couldn't have done that if Alan and the department heads weren't running the city, making sure we have money, making sure that people are getting hired on time. Lynn, making sure that public utilities and public works are both operating, both chiefs making sure that the city's safe. So they are the biggest group of enablers to allow me to go barreling out of the office and go meet with the right kind of people to make that Riverwalk happen, to make whatever's going on happen, Pioneer Interchange, things of that nature. So nothing that I do can happen without them. And I want you to know that this is fun for me. Being a city manager is fun, and they make it fun. And the staff that works, I don't think we have people working for us. We have people working with us, and the staff working with us. I've seen it's not me. It's the economy's picked up. We have the right team of department heads here, but I have seen the staff. For the most part, I don't know a staff member that doesn't like coming to work anymore. I met a whole bunch of them when I first got here. So I think we've made great strides as a team, and I'd like to thank the department heads that are still here, but thank you very much. I go around on Friday, Vice Mayor Stiltner, and I say on Friday when I'm talking to folks that's the worst day of the week for me. Because I'm not going to be able to work with those people till Monday morning. It's a whole weekend. That's not counting Susan's people who work 21 days in a row. I can always catch them on a weekend, and I usually do at a ball game or something. But my hat's off to that whole team, about 447 people, give or take. They're the ones that allow for those very nice comments, so I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, and with that, we will wrap this up. My best wishes to the mayor for a speedy recovery.
He was watching.
Yeah, it's certainly
He
not
was
the same not having him sit here at the dais.
Happy birthday.
Whose birthday? John?
You had one, didn't you? Yesterday?
Sunday.
Outstanding. You get any discounts or benefit cards by chance at that particular level? Or?
Gotta work on that.
Wait
Right.
a while.
Yeah.
Wait a couple of years.
Sorry about that, Mark.
All right, no worries. With that, everybody have a good night.